I'm good, thanks. I appreciate you having me on your podcast. This is great.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Um, I'm going to start by taking you back to where it all began, um, and how you got into ski racing. What made you first fall in love with the sport?
I got into ski racing. My older brother was actually he ski raced before I did, and being a typical younger brother, I wanted to do what he was doing. So when he started in the ski club, he was probably 8 years, or I guess he was 7 years old, and I was quite a bit younger. I was about five, so he's 2 years older than me, and I was so jealous that he got to do it and I didn't. So they they made an exception for me. This was long, long time ago, over 35 years ago now. But they made an exception to allow me to enter the ski club as a 5-year old, which was really cool. I had a great time. The local club was called the New York State Ski Education Foundation. That's where I grew up racing, and that's where actually my kids are at now. But yeah, I mean, I think my first years of ski racing were just, it was based around more skiing than ski racing. That's really where I grew a love for it. I loved the freedom of being out, being a young kid, being able to go out on the mountain and kind of do whatever you sort of wanted to within some boundaries. Um, and then I loved the social aspect. I had a lot of friends. There was a lot of local kids that were all skiing together. So that's kind of how I got into it in the beginning. And then I started to have some success when I was, I guess for my age, I had some success when I was 10, 11 years old on the state level, and sort of got interested into racing a bit more than just skiing around. And then a couple years later, I actually started doing quite well. I went to the Topolino games over in Italy, so the children's games, and I won the giant slalom there, and then did the Whistler Cup, won the giant slalom and the Super G, or giant slalom and the slalom there. So that kind of pushed me into the ski team to a certain extent. That was back in the days when the U.S. team was taking athletes at a younger age than they probably are now, or starting to pay attention to them, certainly at a younger age than they are now. And so that was kind of my first exposure with the ski team, and I was an invitee for the team for a year, and then I made the development team proper, and that kind of started the next phase of my journey. But that was sort of what led up to me. I would say professionalizing my ski racing career more than just kind of a fun hobby kid thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
Can I just pick you up on something you said about your children, Ski?
Yeah.
Would you encourage them to follow in Dad's footsteps?
So that really depends on what they want to do. I'm a firm believer that really anything, but in particular sports, and in particular, I think sports are tough, right? Like if it comes from within and it's something that you're passionate about, then I think it can be an incredible experience. I think if it's pushed on you from external forces,
Yeah.
which I mean ultimately it will be if you reach a certain level in sports. It wasn't, it came from within me, as a kid, and even as I went through the ranks in the ski team in the World Cup. But I also know what it feels like to be pushed from the outside, and I think it's okay as an adult to have some external pushing, but as a kid, it really needs to, pretty 99% of it needs to come from within you. So
Excellent.
that's a long way to get to an answer of, yeah,
Yeah. No,
absolutely. If they
that's good.
want to, I certainly support anything they want to do. But I wouldn't necessarily push them into it. And right now they're into my oldest daughter. My father-in-law actually jumped in the Grenoble Olympics for the U.S. team. So my oldest daughter's very much into ski jumping. She also likes alpine skiing. My second daughter really likes um, alpine skiing and has started jumping. So they've got a lot going on, which is really fun. That's part of one of the coolest things about living in a town like Lake Placid,
Yeah.
because we have all the venues. They get to try all of that and figure out what works for them and what they're passionate about. But right now they're passionate about everything. So it's very cool. It's very cool to watch as a parent.
Cheers. Thanks for that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned your own kids there, and I presume it was a similar situation with yourself growing up. And do you feel that across America, children or teenagers are quite easily inspired? They can go into the town, and as you say, so many sports you can take part in, so many sports you can watch on the TV. Do you think that the young people are? It's easy to be inspired because of all these possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely was for me. I mean, I grew up in Lake Placid, which is a very that we have very deep roots as an Olympic town. I think we've sent somebody to the Winter Olympics. I believe every Winter Olympics that's ever happened, we've had at least one local resident that's gone. So you grow up around in that environment where the guy that lives down the street or the mailman or whoever it might be, they're all Olympians. It makes everything seem very, very possible. And I believe I don't want to get the number wrong, but in 2010, so for those games, I was one of, I think there's something like 12 or 18 local Olympians that came from Lake Placid, and some were transplants, but a lot of us were, really true born and raised locals of the area. So, yeah, I mean, incredibly easy in a town like this to get inspired, but I think that you're definitely onto something. I mean, we have a lot of access to sports in the US, and I think it's easy to find inspiration. My concern now as I look from the outside in, and this is kind of me getting on my soapbox, is that things tend to get professionalized very, very early now. There's less play and there's less fun. Not to say that fun's been removed, but sport, just for the purpose of going and doing sport and having fun, has slowly diminished. And I think that concerns me for a couple reasons, because it hurts the access to sport. And I think that sport is such a great conduit to teach a lot of life lessons that you're going to use as you grow and learn into other disciplines of your life. But it also concerns me that it will cause frustration for kids rather than allow them to experience the really positive values of what sport brings. And that's me. That's my personal soapbox. So I'm not going to go down that.
That's fine. That's good. That's good. It's good to hear that. It's good to hear.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about one of the junior competitions that has got a little bit of spotlight in the sport, and your bronze medal, which you picked up in the 2006 World Junior Championships.
Yes.
Do you feel that these kind of events are still important, even though that competitiveness can be instilled in a racer from a very young age? And do you feel that your own success at what is deemed to be some kind of major championship was important to take into Olympics and world champs when you got there later in your career?
It definitely depends on the person. It was definitely important for me at where I was at with my career at that time. And as I was trying to figure out the direction that I was going in, that World Junior Championship medal actually for me was a very important stepping stone to kind of push me in the direction that I went. So I won the bronze medal at the 2000, must have been 2005, 2006. Yeah, 2006 World Junior
2006.
Championships. And yeah, I mean, it did a couple things for me, and this is my personal experience, but it pushed me in the direction of speed racing. So from that result, I was able to start training and spending more time with the US, the speed side of the team. And that next summer I went down to Chile with the team. I spent 4 weeks down there, and that kind of springboarded me into, a much more developed and in a lot of ways a much safer speed racer. So I don't know what would have happened without that particular result, but I think that there are still, it's always a balance, right? Like you want to be able to create milestones that are meaningful for athletes. And I guess when I talk about the professionalization of sports, I'm talking more about 10, 11, 12 years old, where, kids are expected to hit X, Y, and Z markers of days on snow or days in the gym. And to me, those are more developmental years where you're kind of learning your body, you're learning yourself and learning what your passions are. As I got into my late teens, I had made a very, conscious decision for where I was at mentally at that time, that ski racing was something that I wanted to pursue to the highest level. So, I think just different stages of life. But once you're really, I think, making the decisions for yourself and very consciously saying, yes, I want to do this, or no, I don't want to do this, without a lot of input from the outside, then I think the milestones are really important, whether it's World Junior Championships or the North American Cup or the European Cup. Those are all very, very important training grounds and very important events for the experiences that you're going to have later, like the Olympics or World Championships or World Cup. So, yeah.
And then 4 years later, also on Canadian snow, you scored at the time, which was probably the biggest result of your career at the time, the medal in the Vancouver 2010 Olympics. And you mentioned already that there were a lot of locals at those games. So did that make it extra special, the fact you had scored a medal on the podium with Bode as well?
Yeah. Everything you just said is 100% correct. And I don't know if it's my connection that's a little bad or yours, but I just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It keeps popping up as well, but it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, no, everything that you just highlighted was something that made those games so special for me. First of all, it was my first games. It was something that I had worked towards for my entire life up to that point. That had always been my goal, was to make an Olympic team. So that was kind of step one, was making it to the games, and then being a part of an incredible contingent from Lake Placid, of very successful athletes. I think, all told, by the end of that games, I believe, we sent something like 12 or 18 athletes, but I think that we had, 4 or 5 medals that came out of it, when you look at the sliding sports, and Billy DeMong from Nordic Combined, winning 2 of my medal. So it was a very successful games for us, all told, and it was very, very special to be a part of that. And then to have the experience on the US, the ski team side, where we also had a very successful games. So, there's Lindsay won 2 medals, Julia won 2 medals, Bode won a gold and a bronze, and then, a gold and a bronze, and then I won a gold and a silver, sorry. And then I had my bronze medal. So to be a part of that was really incredible. And then the race itself, to be on the podium with Bode, was, to talk about somebody that I'd watched for my entire life, and somebody that I really looked up to as a younger athlete. And then to be able to stand on the podium with him at my first Olympic Games was totally incredible. My only regret at all my Olympics is that I never got to hear our national anthem play. It was always the Norwegian national anthem when we were standing on the top. But I think if that's my biggest regret, then that's okay. Not too bad.
Yeah.
Well, that does actually answer one of my questions. Do you have any regrets?
You know, I think I always look back at my career and say these are things that I could have done better, but I don't know that, other than getting hurt less, I don't know that there's anything that I would really, really say that I regret. The way that I always look at things is that everything's a learning experience. Whether I did it poorly or I did it well, I should have learned something from it. So when you have that type of mindset, it's hard to have a lot of regret. I feel like my negative experiences, which I think would typically be regrets, or some of the ones that I learned the most out of. And the ones that I grew the most with, and not just as a ski racer, but as a person. I think you take a lot away. If you allow yourself, you can take a lot away from negative experience as well as positive. Um, if I had to look at one, I wish I had maybe skied more GS. I got pushed into speed, which I was very good at, and I liked a lot. I really enjoyed it, and it came down to a matter of how much time and energy did I have to devote to different events. But GS was always a big passion of mine, and it's something that I think in a alternate space I could have been very successful at, but I had to make decisions, and the speed side was working very well, and I have no regret about choosing that option. I just probably wish that I had made a little bit more time to do the other, but that's life.
Do you feel that the World Cup success you had is on a par with the Olympic medal you got? Or do you find that you would have preferred to have had more Olympic success as opposed to your World Cup success?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I had, race for race. If you look at a percentage, I had a lot more Olympic success than I did World Cup success. And that's not to say, I had periods of time where I was very successful on the World Cup, or where I felt like I had found my consistency on the World Cup. It happened to coincide very closely with when I had Olympic success. So, I had a good amount of World Cup success leading up to the 2010 Olympics. So that was kind of building, and I was knocking on the door of podiums, and I was getting top tens and things like that. I was very close to very, very good results. And then I had a major injury a week after the Olympics got done in Norway. And I was booted on my left ankle for several months. I had a shoulder reconstruction. So that kind of set everything back. And then I had a series of injuries in those following couple of years. I had a second shoulder surgery. I had two more ankle surgeries. And that was also between the 2010 Olympics and the 2014 Olympics. I had two shoulder reconstructions and two ankle reconstructions, which just kind of halted my progression and kept me from having much success on the World Cup level, just because I wasn't, I was never able to get back into the flow. Really, the first race that I got back into my flow was the 2014 games in Sochi, and then after that, and who can argue with the timing? I'm very happy with that, but after that, then I went into a couple of years of very consistent World Cup success. Where I was very close to having a couple wins on the World Cup. I did have a couple podiums. I was always right there. I never broke through for a win, but that's the way I always looked at skiing, is that it's you can only control what you can control, and what somebody else does, and what incredible experience, what incredible performance they have on a given day. That's totally up to them. My focus was always, how do I be the best ski racer that I can be, and then if that puts me at 10th place, that's great. If that puts me on the podium, that's even better. But I can't control how good Axel was,
No,
and
no.
guys like that, and that's just the reality. But it was all good, and I definitely. I enjoyed the times when I was having consistent World Cup success more than anything, because it was, I really cherished those moments, because it's very, very nice to wake up on any given day and say, hey, you know what? I could really go and have a great race. And even if it's not a perfect race, it can still be a good race. And, on the flip side, when I was struggling to get back into it after injury, it was just like, it was hard to break out of that cycle and feel like there was a lot of upside to getting out and racing, other than trying to find my speed again.
Yeah. From what you're saying, it seems to me as though I always believe that I know podiums are important, but I always think I always look at the times, how far away from the podium.
Mhm.
Do you? And from what you were saying, you seem to be of the same mindset that if you do a good time, it doesn't. All right, you might have missed the podium, but you've succeeded in what you aim to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was always about what I was doing. Like that was what I was focused on, and taking away the positives and from from the run that I had or from the race that I had, and also trying to work on the negatives and control, what I could out of the negatives for the next race. I think the 2010 Olympics is a great example. That year I was tenths of a second away from the podium a number of times throughout that whole season in Super Gs, where I was 10th place. I was maybe 2/10 from the podium, something like that. In that particular race, I was third place. I think Bode was second place, 300ths of a second ahead of me, and Werner Heel was fourth place, 200ths of a second behind me. And if I had been a tenth of a second slower, I would have been eighth place or something like that. So, I mean,
Yeah,
you take it when
yeah,
you get it, but you don't complain about it when it goes the other way. I think you
yeah,
know, that's just the way you got to look at it.
yeah. Thank you.
I couldn't help but notice in my preparation that you quite liked the US races. Over half of your World Cup top tens came in Beaver Creek. Was there
Mhm.
something special about that resort that meant you could ski better, or you'd been on the track so many times that the results always seem to be pretty solid?
Yeah, I really liked Beaver Creek. Like I was saying before, I came out of a GS background. So the courses that suited me the best were the ones that had less gliding. So from a course standpoint, um, Beaver Creek was one of the more technical courses on the circuit. So that's one that I always excelled at. But I also liked racing at home. So Beaver Creek was at home because it was in the US, and similar to Vancouver, I really enjoyed racing up there because I had friends and family there. The other place that I really felt at home a lot was there's two places. I really liked Kufjell in Norway, and I liked Kitzbühel. And those were both because those felt like home because the snow was the same as what I grew up racing on. So Beaver Creek is a little different because it's Colorado snow, beautifully prepared, but different from what I remember growing up on. Kitzbühel is almost like a carbon copy of the type of snow that I grew up racing on the East Coast. A little bit sometimes frozen, granular, not very aggressive. And so every time that I would race there, and Kitzbühel was very similar most of the time, unless it was crazy, crazy cold. Um, so most of the time that I raced in those places, I felt at home because the conditions were so similar to what I'd grown up on, and it gave me a huge sense of comfort. So I think if you look at between Beaver Creek, Kufjell, and Kitzbühel, those are the places that I had the most success, and it's all just because of a total comfort zone with either the conditions or just the feeling and vibe that was happening when I was racing there.
I do want to.
Go
Can
on.
I go? I do want to bring up Kitzbühel because you scored your second World Cup podium there,
Yeah.
and you said that you didn't like the gliding courses, and also considering that you're probably one of the smaller, or you were one of the smaller skiers on tour, did you feel that you were at any disadvantage against the Norwegians and even your fellow American teammates in those respects?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's why I preferred Super G to downhill in most situations. I just get hammered in the gliding sections. I wasn't a good glider. I didn't have a great touch on the snow. So that was all me. That was bad at, I just had a tendency to push my edges too hard. But yeah, and then the physical side, I wasn't physically built to be a glider. I wasn't, I didn't have the mass or the momentum. So kind of two things working against me, when you compare me at 170 centimeters and, whatever I was, 80 kilos to the guys that are 200 and, 210 centimeters and 110 kilos. It's just, the physics doesn't line up that well. So that's why I really preferred the courses. I preferred hard snow because that was a place that I could push on my edges pretty hard and not get penalized too much for it. And then I liked courses where I was turning a lot. And when you put the two of those together, that's when it was either hard snow or like spring refreeze snow. I also really liked just because it's, you can kind of do what you want on it. So yeah.
I'm glad you just said that, because I was going to say, do you think that the technical GS helped you find a better line for the downhill speed event?
Absolutely. And I was always my best when I was training a lot of GS is when I always skied my best in speed. Super G or downhill.
Yeah.
That was always, if I was struggling at GS, I was never going to find my downhill and Super G feel. But when I was skiing good GS, it was that everything else kind of made sense. My movement patterns were good, and and just it's kind of it's the same thing, just sped up a lot. So if you can do it in GS, then you can theoretically, if you have the kind of basic skills to ski speed, you can slow it down, and it should almost be a little bit easier because you have more time, and the consequences are higher, but you have a little more time to think about things.
Yeah, I'd like to come to the current World Cup scene in just a moment, but first, I'm going to take you to the 2014 games in Sochi, which wasn't quite a place that nobody had skied on, but not as many had done. So was the approach different going into that games? Did you still believe you were a medal contender?
No. I believed I was very lucky to make the team. And I really did kind of make the team sort of last minute, sort of by the skin of my teeth. I had a couple results earlier in the year where I almost had great results, and I was kind of in the mix all the time. So I barely made that team, and it just so happened that things were starting to click as I was going into the Sochi games. I was finding I'd switched to head that spring from Rosengol. So I was finally starting to feel like my equipment was clicking, and actually Bode switched to a different model of ski. So I took all his old skis that he was racing on, and that's actually what I switched to the week before the games, right after Kitzbühel. I went and trained with Ted and Saalbach, and I found some skis that were really working for me at that time, which just happened to be Bode's race skis that he had just decided that he didn't want anymore. And those are the ones that I used in Sochi. So no, I went in, and frankly, I wasn't really sure what my future was after Sochi. I was kind of going in, and I was very happy that I made the team, but I just, after 4 years of feeling like I was getting beat down and I wasn't having the breaks that I wanted, and having, I was getting to the point where my wife and I were thinking about starting a family and moving to, different stages of our lives. And it was kind of a question of whether or not I even wanted to keep ski racing. And then I kind of in a lot of ways went into the Sochi run like maybe that was my last big ski race. So I was going into the Sochi run. Kvitfjell was a couple weeks later, and then that might have been it for me in an alternate universe. Obviously, I had a great race in Sochi. I followed it up with a very solid race in Kvitfjell. So that pushed me into another couple of years of really fun, great ski racing, until my body started to break down again. And then I slowly just drifted off into obscurity, and was happy to do that.
Yeah, because going into Sochi in 2014, I think you started the race in a very late 20s.
Yeah.
At that point, you hadn't scored a World Cup podium. So was it almost, if this one doesn't go well, that might well be it? and then you obviously produced a bronze medal. Silver, bronze.
Yeah. Yeah, that was part of it. And I just not to get in the weeds too much, but I remember going into that and saying, you know what, this might be my last race. Um, I've been kind of playing around with this person's telling me to do it this way. This person's telling me that I should be doing this or should be doing that. I feel like I've actually in the last 2 weeks I've started skiing well, so I'm gonna make a plan and stick to a plan. And I'll never forget, you know, when I had my inspection in Sochi, coming into the first, you know, the first real big right hand turn, down onto that first pitch. Remember looking at it and saying, I'm going to put my foot on the blue line. That's kind of going to be where I'm going to gauge my line off of. And then I'm going to dive into the pitch and just, you know, make good turns and then carry the speed onto the flat. So as I was, and I made a commitment to myself that I was going to race my plan. I was going to, you know, I was going to go in, I was going to make a plan, I was going to stick to it. So I remember pushing out of the start, affirming that with myself when I was in the start, and I skated across to the first blue line and looked at it, and everybody's tracks went 2 meters up above the blue line. And I almost followed all the tracks. And then I said, you know what, if I don't have the balls to at least stick to one plan here and at least at the very least go out in style doing it the way that I had committed to doing it, then what am I even doing here? So I put my foot on the blue line. I survived those first turns and kind of got through, and I was like, that might have been overcooked, but I think it was pretty good. I didn't make any mistakes, and I definitely went straighter than everybody. And yeah, I mean that was sort of the story of that race for me. And I just think a great lesson for me to learn anyway is you know you can't have room for doubt. You know, you just need to kind of make a plan, whether it's a good plan. You just got to do something, and if it doesn't work, learn from it. But in that situation, it did work, and it was very very cool day.
Did you think coming down after you'd taken a different line that there's a slight possibility that this could be one of my last races, potentially my last Olympic race? You take that different line. Is it going through your head? I've got a chance of a medal here, or are you still just solely focused on getting to the bottom as quickly as possible?
No, I skied a great race. That's the only way I can put it. I executed everything that I wanted to, and I got to the bottom, and I said, you know what, that's the race that I've been waiting for a long time. And that's probably on a day where the conditions are getting slower and everything's getting softer. I remember coming through the finish and saying, you know, that's got to be good for a top 10. You know, and I was thrilled about that. That was very exciting to me that I was able to make a plan, execute a plan, and feel really good about the skiing that I did. And that was the biggest thing, is that I felt really good about my whole preparation and execution of the race. And then it came to light that, you know, I didn't even look at my time, and I was going out towards the exit, and I heard all the people cheering and all this type of stuff. So I actually looked up at the clock. I was like, no, there's no way that happened. And I looked up again, and then it kind of dawned on me that well, this is real. I just won another Olympic medal, kind of by the narrowest margins in my mind. You know, it was I had already mentally kind of moved on from what I was doing right now to a certain extent, and it in a weird way that gave me the freedom, I think, to actually perform the way that I had been trying to perform by forcing it for a number of years. So
yeah, Andrew, do you think in some instances athletes should take it on themselves to do what they feel? I know you have coaches and you discuss things, but do you think sometimes you've got to do what you did and say, I think this and I'm going to do it?
yeah, I think there's a good balance, like anything. You know, there needs to be, at the end of the day, you're the one that has to live with the performance that you put out as an athlete. So there needs to be that ownership over, yes, I'm gonna go. I took all this information from all these coaches, all these training days. I know what's working. I know what's not working. This is my plan. Now I gotta go and do it. And at the end of the day, that's what matters is what you're doing. Um, I think that it's very important to always be a student, take all the information that you can from all the resources that you can, whether that's your own physiology, what the coaches are telling you, what you see on video, what you discuss on video with the coaches, what you hear in the course reports, and then you just take the best shot at it, especially in Super G, because it's a one shot deal. You're kind of flying in the dark a little bit sometimes and just creating a plan as you go and sort of building the plane around you as you hit the first turn. And a lot of times I remember being in the first turn in a Super G and being like, oh wow, this snow feels totally different than I thought it was going to feel. All right, scrap that plan, new plan, or the snow's way faster than I thought it was going to be. Like everything's coming more quickly than I thought it was going to be. So there's there's a balance, like you gotta trust the plan, but you also have to understand that part of the plan is to be flexible and to kind of roll with it if you have to.
I must admit, I was really impressed with when you was talking about the 2 meter marker, what you thought everyone else was using, and you decided to do what you planned. That shows your positivity, and that is something what's important for a skier, surely, to be positive about whatever you do, even if it's not what you had planned to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, maybe could have gone the other way, put it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah,
But
yeah.
there's 28 people at least that went before me, and they did it one way, and I decided as the 28th guy that I was the one that was right. And the nice thing about starting 29 is nobody would have noticed if I was wrong. Nobody would have criticized it. They said, "Hey, that guy started 29. Clearly, he didn't know what he was talking about." So, that definitely, coming into in particular the Olympics, um, coming in as an underdog gives you a ton of flexibility to kind of
Yeah,
just
yeah,
focus on the performance. I think coming in as a favorite with the Olympics is tough, especially as an American, because there's so much emphasis on the Olympics. With winter sports in particular, that's what people watch every 4 years. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure for the favorites. And you've seen favorites from the US team. We saw it with Bode in 2006, where it was a catastrophe, and he was criticized for not winning a medal. But I mean, he got fifth place in one race. That's still a great weekend. It was
yeah,
just, a great couple weeks of racing, but it wasn't what he was expected to do. And then again, in 2022 with Michaela, it's not that she's a failure or anything like that. It's just she didn't have her best week of racing on the week where everybody expected her to be her best. And that's what's cool about the Olympics, I think, in a lot of ways. But it's also one of the cruel aspects of the Olympics is that it's built up to be this thing that's bigger than it is. And at the end of the day, it is fundamentally still a ski race, or whatever race you happen to
yeah.
be doing. It's just there's a lot more around it that isn't specific to the sport, or can be, but not. It wasn't for me, but other people.
Yeah.
Well, you've already mentioned Michaela Schifrin, but what are your thoughts on the current US Alpine Skiing World Cup setup, and is it improving? Is it going to get better? Is it in a very good place at the moment? What are your overall impressions?
So, I think right now we have a lot of very our high end is very high, but we're kind of missing the middle. And I feel like US racing always goes through cycles, where the resources go either to the top athletes, and then as those top athletes start to age out or start to retire, then they're left with no top athletes, and then the resources go back to the development, and you get a very strong crew of development that comes up, and then they become top athletes. And then the resources go up to the high end, and that seems to be the cycle. If you look back historically, you had the era of the Mayors and Bill Johnson and that whole crew, and then then those guys retired, and then there was a certain period of time where there wasn't much going on. Then you had a little bit of a resurgence with Tommy Moe and AJ Kitt and those guys through the mid 90s. And then they all retired, and it was a few years before Bode and that crew came on. And then, I think that was kind of the sweet spot right there, is because after the mid 90s, there was a huge, even before Bode and Daron Rahlves and that whole crew, there was a huge investment in the development side, which is where myself and Ted Ligety and Lindsey Vaughn and Julia Mancuso and that whole crew of mid 80s birth year to early 90s came out of. And then we all started to retire, and when I look at the U.S. team now, I see it as there's some very strong people at the top end, but there's not a lot of depth behind it. You look at men's GS, and River had a great season last year, which was fantastic, but not a ton behind him. It's nice to see on the women's side that there's starting to be more depth. There's some women that are coming in and supporting Michaela on the tech side. There's a new crop of speed women that are starting to come up. I would say on the men's speed side, again, we've had a lot of retirements over the past several years with Marco Sullivan, myself, and this is kind of going back more than a couple years, I guess. But then Steve Nyman and Travis Ganong. So there's a lot of high level that went out. You still have Jared and Bryce that are doing very well, but not a ton behind it. There's starting to be some younger kids that are coming up, but I wouldn't say, when I was coming into the speed team, it was the 22 to 24-year-olds that were pushing the older guys. Rather right now it's kind of the older guys are pulling some of the younger guys, and that can all change very quickly. But it's always a balancing act of, with a finite amount of resources that an organization or a country has to give, how much do you put towards development and how much do you put towards high performance? And we've had such a good high performance side for so long that of course the resources are going there, and that's that is the way that it should be, because you got to make hay while the sun shines. But at the same time, I think we're paying some of that debt right now with the development and trying to bring up the next group of athletes that are going to be coming up. But I mean, I think that the culture in the organization is strong, so it'll happen. But you take a couple of the real top end athletes out of it, like you take away Michaela, if for whatever reason she decided that she were to retire, and there's not a ton, there's bright spots within the team, the Bryce and the couple wins that he had in Val Gardena and Rivers podium. But I would not say as a team everything looks quite as good without her, 1,800 World Cup points that she brings to the table every year.
Yeah.
Are you all right?
Yeah, you're right.
No, I'm saying, are you okay? Because you said Michaela Schifrin.
Oh yeah, I'm okay.
Retire.
Yeah, you're okay. Michaela Schifrin's one of my sort of what I like to watch. Yeah. I just love to watch her. Her technique, timing, everything is so good.
Yeah. She's perfect. I mean, she's as close to perfect, male or female, I think, that anybody in ski racing has ever been. It really is so impressive to watch her, and I think everybody can learn something from watching the way that she skis.
Yeah.
So outside of the USA, who are you excited to see next season and last season?
I can't wait to watch Hirscher come back. It's rare that you ever get to settle a debate like, who generationally is the best skier, and I think that clearly Hirscher's coming back because he's been training, with Haugen, he does a lot of the development for Van Deer. So he's been clearly, in my opinion, he's been skiing with Haugen and God,
Christopherson.
Yeah, Christopherson. And my God, I've got to believe he's been putting pace on those guys and saying to himself, why am I standing here when I can beat these guys? So I think it'll be very interesting to take somebody from that generation where him and Ted were, arguably two of the best GS skiers ever, and then now you have my name recall right now is terrible. The Swiss kid that
Odermatt.
is, yeah, Odermatt. That's just incredible at GS. But in the back of my head, I've always wondered, like, is he better than Hirscher was, or is it just that there is no Hirscher, so he seems that good? So I think that'll be really fun to watch this year. And also, Hirscher going back into the slalom side again. He was so dynamic and so fun to watch in slalom, and to see him reinserted back into that crew, I think will be very cool. And outside of that, I mean, I love watching Odermatt. He is incredible. He has such an incredible touch on his skis that you rarely see. It looks like he's hardly doing anything, and everything keeps moving down the fall line. And for him to take it from being primarily a GS skier into Super G into downhill, being able to translate those skills that well is pretty impressive. So very excited about that. I'm excited to see some of the younger women on the US side try to make their mark, because I think that they're starting to knock on the door, and hopefully, for them, unfortunately, it's been an issue of injuries. So hopefully they can stay healthy, and also excited to see what younger men are coming up on the US. I think that there's like I was saying, there's a lot on the top end. There's a lot of people pulling the younger guys up. So hopefully that happens, and there's a new group that's coming up and able to start competing.
Yeah.
Very good. How are you still involved in ski racing? You mentioned your kids. Say you something involved with the ski club in New York.
Yeah. So the club that I grew up with, I'm on the board of directors at that club. And then Ted Ligety and I do a ski camp every summer out in Mount Hood. So we do ski camps with Ted Ligety and Andrew Weibrecht out at Mount Hood for 3 weeks, like end of June, beginning of July. So that's more or less the extent of the coaching. But I'm also the athlete rep for the athlete commission for the U.S. Olympic Committee. So I'm the athlete rep for ski and snowboard. So I represent all of the ski and snowboard sports, ski and snowboard as an organization, for the athlete voice on the Olympic Committee. So yeah, and then that keeps me involved with some of the stuff on the ski team tangentially. I'm on their board, so kind of loosely involved. I like to look from the outside in rather than the be in the middle of it anymore. But it's from my perspective, it's a great sport, and it's a sport worth seeing move forward, and trying to help figure out how to nurture it into the next generation as things change, as the world changes, and frankly, the economics in ski towns change in the US.
Yeah.
And those are different challenges. Everything has gone a lot less grassroots, and I think that we need to figure out how to balance and bring it back to a place where a lot more people can learn how to ski and get involved in ski racing, and then figure out who our best athletes are from there, not make it such an expensive sport that it's only a small percentage of people that can do it. I mean, it's always going to be like that to a certain extent, but I think more access is going to be a great thing. And those are the things I like to work on, in terms of ski racing. And I guess that's sort of the way that I look at how I like to give back to a sport that has given me so much and given me so many great experiences.
Yeah, very good.
Very good.
Have you got any more questions, Alan?
I was just going to say, with what you just been saying about Ayrshire coming back, do you still ski?
Yeah, yes.
You're not
I'm not.
coming back, are you?
What's that?
You're
No,
not
no,
coming
no.
back.
No. Yes, I do. I still ski. Obviously I ski with my kids. That's the bulk of what I do. But since I've retired, I've tried to backcountry ski a lot more. That's been something that I always wanted to do, but never really had time to do. And I've gotten the last few years, I've really gotten into Nordic skiing. So I'm kind of more on that side. You know, I love to climb mountains and ski down. I love to Nordic ski and get exercise, and I love to ski with my kids. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I will move to the quick-fire questions then
Yeah.
to finish off. And I'll start with your favorite place to ski.
Outside of Whiteface, well, there's a lot, but I love Whistler Blackcomb. I've always had great experiences there.
Nice and short and snappy.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the best moment of your career.
Probably the 2014 Olympics. I mean, just the feeling of coming through the finish there and realizing that 4 years of, difficult ups and downs finally had a very positive payoff in a tangible sense, not just the character building type of payoff, but actually like this is what I was working towards and this is what I've accomplished because of it was pretty incredible.
Yeah, very good. Next one is your best friend in the sport.
Probably Mark O'Sullivan. He was kind of the guy that when I retired or when he retired, he was the hardest person to figure out how to how to replace in terms of that guy that was on the team that was always there and very supportive and just a great guy and breath of fresh air to have around.
Very good. What is your aspiration for the rest of your involvement in the sport, however long that may be?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it before, but I think my aspiration is just to figure out how to make ski racing and skiing more accessible to more people. It's gone the other direction. I think collectively as a community, we need to figure out ways to involve more communities in ski racing to keep not only to keep the sport of skiing healthy and growing, but also the pipeline for ski racing there and find that next group of people that can be developed into great athletes.
And finally, one thing that you would change about FIS.
Oh, I off the top of my head, the TV debacle that's going on right now. I've got to get up early to watch the races anyway, and if I can't figure out where to watch them at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm probably going back to bed. So that's been the limiting factor right now for me following ski racing more closely.
Potentially a reason why a lot of young Americans don't see it or don't get involved themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Well, that is all the questions. Thank you very much for your time,
Thank
Andrew.
you.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, thank you both. It's been great talking to you, and I always appreciate a great conversation about ski racing. So, thank you.
Really appreciate it. Very good.
Enjoy your vacation.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Thank you.
All the very best.
Thanks. You too. See ya.
See ya.
See you. Bye now.
Well, thank you for listening on YouTube, and we will see you later.
See you later. We will.